Good morning. It's 10 o'clock, so I'd like to call the Health Related Institutions Formal Advisory Committee meeting to order. Thank everyone for being here this morning. I'm Michael Tremonti from UT Health Science Center Houston, UT Health Houston, the committee chair. Please be advised that this meeting is being broadcast over the internet and recorded, so I'd ask all attendees to silence your cell phones. Also, since we are meeting via Zoom, please mute your connection until you're ready to speak to prevent background noise. Thanks. Let's go ahead and begin with the roll call of members. Ms. Berger?
All right, then. Good morning. Looks like we still have a couple of people coming in, so we'll go a little slowly here. I'll start with Dr. Chase. Is anyone here representing Dr. Chase today? Okay, Ms. Gomez-Leon.
Here.
Great. Mr. Guajardo.
Present.
Ms. Harkey.
Here.
Ms. Harms. Is anyone here representing her today, Ms. Harms? Okay. Dr. Lang.
Here.
Great. Mr. Lewis.
Present.
Ms. Marion Hill.
Present.
Dr. Morey.
Present.
Mr. Mueller.
Here.
Ms. Nace.
Present.
Ms. Shear.
I'll be representing Lauren Shear today. This is Rachel Osterloh.
Okay. Mr. Tremonti, of course.
Present.
And Ms. Withers. Is anyone here today representing Ms. Withers? All right, I'll come back to Dr. Chase. Is anyone here on her behalf?
Jim Briggs, representing Diane Chase.
Great. Okay, and coming back to Ms. Harms. Is anyone here on her behalf? All right, thank you. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. So zipping through the agenda as usual. Item number 4 is a review of the meeting minutes. So if that's okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Guajardo.
Thank you, Mike. Morning, everybody. Melita Berger shared the minutes from the last meeting from September 27th. Hope everybody had an opportunity to review. Are there any comments about the meeting minutes? Is there any motion to review and approve the minutes? Thank you, Dr. Lang. Any second? Thank you, Penny. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, thanks so much. So let's move on to agenda item number 5, and really this is to get a update on where we stand. The first charge that we had was to study and make recommendations for the appropriate funding levels of I&O infrastructure, research enhancement, and graduate medical education and mission-specific formulas. Let's start with really the key items on as far as base rates and things along that line. Melita, could you share the summary?
Yes.
So we've we've taken the recommendations of the committee as far as the inflation rate. We've also received from you your projected growth for the coming biennium, and we've plugged in those numbers. We've, as you can see on the screen, we basically had $2,955,000,000 in total health related funding. And we are now recommending with these changes that it increase $546 million to $3.5 billion, an average 18.49%. To give you a little bit of an idea of the different components of the increase, the center section deals with the inflationary aspects of these formulas, and Melita, please keep me honest here. So we're looking at roughly 19 to 20% increase over the 2019 rates. The growth that we've plugged in, and again, we are missing a few numbers on that, so I would appreciate everybody making sure their enrollment numbers, their research numbers, everything is up to speed as much as possible. There's still some adjustment ultimately that could occur to the overall I&O formula amounts, because as of right now, we haven't differentiated between graduate and undergraduate for allied health and nursing, and certainly that's one of the charges we're dealing with as well. So as those get finalized, then we'll plug those in, and that would also provide a little bit of an uptick. Overall, state-funded FTSEs are only projected to go up 3.3%, so pretty modest growth. Research expenditures are showing a much greater amount, and even that is somewhat tempered because in a lot of the mission specific, especially, they're rolling averages. So you're not seeing necessarily a year over year, but it's I think that again, that's probably no surprise to anybody. GME residence is something that I guess this one sort of fell off the radar screen. We historically have looked backwards to project forwards as far as growth rates. And so I didn't know, and I wanted to get the thought of the committee on GME residents as to whether or not we should have you just provide your expectation for the biennium, and plug those numbers into the equation, or you prefer we just go with sort of the running 3-year average.
Well, and just to clarify, it's not exactly an average. It would be a 3-year projection.
Gotcha.
For a forecast on the last 3 years.
Right.
As it stands. So.
Mike, this is Angelica. Given the number of, grant programs that have come online, innovation grant programs, some of which are funded, and, coordinating board grant funding programs, I think it's probably safest to ask institutions for their projection rather than apply an average growth. But, that's just one thought.
No, I agree with you, actually, and actually we is Ms. Withers, has she joined us today? Amanda, are you there? Or someone's from Sam Houston? Okay, that is one. As we look back at that, we basically noticed that we have nothing for Sam Houston from a residency program. of which, of course, they've only been up and running for a few years now. By 26, 27, though, they may be in the position to have one. So again, I think it goes back to your comment, Angelica, is that obviously looking back for them would not do any good. Let's project what the number would be moving forward. Is everybody okay with taking that approach? Anyone opposed, or any other ideas that as far as projecting these numbers? Okay, well, we'll be reaching out to everyone and getting you to provide your projection for the 26-27 period. On the as far as the other indexes go, again, there's a couple other items being batted around among the charges. And so I think, again, this final table is going to be a work in progress until everything is finalized and incorporated. With that said, let's move to charge 2, and that's to study and make recommendations for the appropriate I&O formula weights. Penny, you've been the work group leader for that. If you could sort of give us an update and where we stand.
Mike, I can do that, but if you go back to that chart that Melita just put up, I'm just thinking overall about last legislative session and about how the legislature may have viewed health-related institutions and how we need to structure this particular pieces of information. When we write the report, and I'm not sure how we've done it historically, there really is 2 components to it. There's a growth component and there is the increase in funding rate components. I think in the past it's been blended. We just said, here's our recommendation and here's all the new money that it takes to get there. I wonder if we need to be more explicit to say, here's how much is growth. We're going to have this to maintain the current rates. And then here is how much we need for increased, to increase the rates. Because last year the health relateds did grow quite a bit. And so therefore we got new money. General academics didn't necessarily grow, so they didn't. So they got money on to increase their rates, and we got money to fund growth. So just a thought there to consider.
No, that's a really good point. I think oftentimes, we see a sizable increase in funding, and I think it on the other side of the coin a bit, it gets lost with the idea of we were experiencing phenomenal growth, and so yeah, we got 300 million, but we didn't move the needle for the base rate. So for most institutions, or certainly the mature institutions, that meant no additional funding.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the key. And on this table, this is sort of, I went the other direction when we initially were drafting this table to think, do we separate it? Because do we want to just focus on growth, or do we want to provide the numbers so that they only focus on growth and not focus on inflation, knowing that inflation hasn't been a priority in years past? So I can go either way. Again, I think the previous table had those pieces broken out, so it's very easy to go that route. And I'd like to get the other committee members' thoughts as well, because I don't know if there is a right answer.
I don't know either. I really don't. And it's a matter of how do we make our case about the rates? That's what I'm concerned about and I don't know what's the right answer.
Right.
Penny, this is Rick. I would agree with you being able to separate those out. will be important. I wouldn't neglect either one. I mean, I think they're both important. But I think separating them out so that they realize at the very minimum, if they don't fund growth, everybody takes a cut. Penny, I think your idea is a very prudent one.
Okay.
Hey, Penny,
Uh,
I support that idea too. I echo Rick's comments. I think, they need to understand what our minimum needs are. If not, then we are taking a cut. So I support that approach.
Agree. This is Jenny. Agree on that same line.
This is Angelica. I have a question. Penny, maybe I misunderstood. Were you saying show, what it would cost with growth to maintain the rate? And then also a second table with inflation in it? Because the comments I'm hearing are we would show a cut if the rate is maintained. Presumably, we wouldn't absorb a cut, right?
I think, Angelica,
Go ahead, Mike.
well, I think you've hit on the stumbling block I had, and why I sort of went this other way, is because it's sort of if I present the growth figure, I have to assume that I'm using the current base rate,
right?
With the growth, and then I have inflation separate and apart. Do I want to plant that seed that the current rate is sufficient? And so, that's
especially in today's
environment.
Yes, in today's environment where I think we have the best chance of success with an inflation argument. Everyone seems to understand, the impact of that, from home to business to everything. So, but I guess getting back to my prior question, if the table that you were that you drafted at first maintains the rate because that's how you would fund enrollment growth, right? Then no one would show a cut, correct? So do we want to show that?
So, Angelica, I guess I looked at it this way. If we're requesting, I'm going to say a total $500 million increase, and let's say the legislature come back and says, we're only going to give you 200 million. And they don't realize that just for growth alone, we would need 350. Then de facto, the rates would be cut. The rates would be cut for all of us. That was my point.
So the result, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So do we take the approach of breaking or showing the cumulative amount and then break it down so that into those two components? Okay, this is what growth would be. This is what inflation would be. So it's at least and I guess I like starting with this is what our end in mind is. And then we break down into the details. And if they want to do a subset, they do a subset. But Dr. Lang, to your point, they know exactly what growth is. This is maintaining the status quo rate-wise, but with growth.
I like that approach. I mean, obviously, Mike, you're the one that's going to have to present this to the coordinating board. I know that's the lens you're looking through right now, is sitting before the coordinating board to present it. But I do like that point. Yes, it can be one, but at the same time, there is additional information that shows the breakout. I like that approach.
So do I. I think it's a great idea.
Do you think we could take that approach by simply adding a footnote to the 546 million to denote in a footnote how much is attributed to growth?
I'd hate to leave that important factor to a footnote. I think it's, I hate to say it, but pictures are worth 1,000 words. And, if we have at least a graph out there for them to take a look at it and catch the eye. And because what we see, the numbers that have been turned in, we have at least a couple medical schools or osteopathic schools that are growing at pretty good rates. And so, we're going to see, a good portion of this is growth related, especially since obviously those are at the highest formula rates.
And I agree with Angelica's comment in the world of inflation. That's the reason I was so disappointed that didn't happen last session, that our rates didn't change, because when you have a session where there's so much extra money, general academics get a large increase and health relateds get no change in their formulas. I was surprised and wondered, how do we make our case better?
Yeah, the upside is that, in prior bienniums, I think we had less success even getting it out of the coordinating board itself. This past biennium, we actually, they took what we brought forward. So I was feeling pretty good that we made it through the, past the coordinating board, and that they were bringing forward our recommendation. You're right. I was disappointed when the legislature opted not to fund inflation, especially at a time when it's front and center in every political conversation that's going on these days. So, okay, we'll go ahead and rework things, and we'll certainly run it, past everybody. That we'll have multiple opportunities to modify things, and we'll certainly, I think it's going to be sort of a belt and suspenders, where we'll break out the tables, we'll put it into the narrative explaining what's going on and so on. So as far as timeline, Penny, what are y'all thinking as far as your work group?
We are finalizing our information. We've developed a template that has, and I'll share this template with you all right now. Melita, if you can allow me to share real quick. This template, when we are looking at both nursing and allied health programs, the type of programs at every institution vary greatly, and some are low cost, much lower cost than others that overall. So this is a template we had developed when we had started this working project last year. We've got some programs, we have some other history here, but if you just take the last 2 years, this is just, this is not a completed idea, but we are taking the undergraduate programs. And so for the health sciences, we're looking at San Antonio, UTMB, Houston, and the Health Sciences Center, because we have the preponderance of the nursing and the health professions programs. So we're going to take an average program by program of all of our programs and look at what this would be the base. So this would be, the 1.138 or the 1.0 for health professions right now. And then we're evaluating this, the average of the graduate programs, to just see how much more does a graduate program cost compared to an undergraduate program. And so we are still compiling all of that information. We should have that finished, Mike, by the end of this week. So I would say probably within the next 10 days, we'll have a draft of our recommendation.
Okay, thanks.
Penny?
Yes.
It would be really helpful. And by the way, thanks for doing all that legwork. And I'd be particularly interested in the 3 institutions that have undergraduate programs and their graduate programs to see whether they're actually 25% higher or maybe even more. So those are within the same institution. Those are probably more comparable than just that long list of graduate programs, many of which are places that don't have undergrad. Does that make sense?
You're saying take and have institution 1, institution 2, and institution 3?
Yeah, again, all the other data is great as well. I would be interested personally in saying in those programs that have both undergraduate and graduate, those 3 programs you mentioned, what the difference is.
And we have that information, Dr. Lang. I think that the risk that we have there is that because, since we're looking at this statewide, so for example, there's institutions that have a CRNA program.
Yeah.
And those are very expensive. I don't have that. So unless you blend all that together, you're missing a very high cost program. And so theirs, it may look very different than what mine might look like. So
Thank you. Thank you, Penny.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay. Charge number 3 was study and make recommendations on the treatment of health-related programs at general academic institutions co-located with health-related institutions. This was a co-charge with the Academic Formula Funding Advisory Committee. Michael Muller, could you give us an update?
Yes, thanks, Mike. We've had several conversations with the General Academic Work Group and kind of getting their thoughts and ideas on how they would approach this. And they had some guiding principles that they wanted to make sure when they made a recommendation that the recommendation wasn't going to harm funding from either the health-related formula or the general academic formula. In other words, we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul to try to find a equitable solution in funding. So they came up with an idea. The best way I can describe it is they're going to run the formula for those programs straight through the formula, through the cost matrix, and they're going to come up with what they have, a student rate, and then on top of that, they're going to ask for, I call it a hold harmless, I call it supplemental funding to balance out the cost per student between the general academic rates and the HRI rates. And we met with them, I think, a week ago, and felt like, you know, we were on board with that we would support them in that approach, so long as it's not, excuse me, so long as it's not harming, like we said, any other program on the either the HRI side or the general academic side. So that's where we stand there with that one. Let me stop there and ask, because there's one other thing that came up in our work group that I like to talk about, but let me ask and stop right there, see if there are any questions about the general academics approach, because I believe we're going to support that, and I think they're taking the lead on writing that recommendation. Are we all supportive of that, I take it? Okay. Then the other issue that's come up is regarding optometry. I think U of H had requested a review very similar to what we did for podiatry, to take a look at whether or not optometry should be part of the HRI formula. And so I've provided them the same the same workbook that we kind of went through last session to determine whether podiatry should be part of the HRI formula, kind of go through that process, that step, defining, you know, is this a medical related track program? So we're still going to be working on that and providing the committee a recommendation here probably by the end of the month, just to take a look at it. There's really 2 ways to look at it. It's either moving an existing program onto the HRI formula and creating a new weight, or increasing the weight in the general academic side. So hopefully that process will guide us to a solution, and I hope to have everything completed by the end of this month.
Okay, that you know, it may end up being very similar to what we encountered last biennium when we were looking at the allied health and graduate school rates, or allied health and nursing rates. we just ran out of time and ended up tabling it for the next committee to address. So I think last biennium, the podiatry issue was raised or even brought forward as one of the charges from the commissioner. So it really was on the front end of things. So we again, we can certainly we'll take that all into consideration as we move forward. Okay. Any other questions or comments for Michael? Okay, hearing none. So number 4, we didn't actually have a work group. Kristen Nace was kind enough to volunteer to put some language and structure around this. And so, Kristen, could you provide an update?
Yes. So Mike had asked or told, I'm not really sure, but I'll take voluntold. And it was a very interesting process. I looked at the small class supplement, identifying what was currently happening, comparing it to the multi-campus adjustment used in the space projection model, and then kind of wrote up draft recommendations. The goal was to simply document the current process. So I utilized existing coordinating board documents and pulled verbiage in to draft something for you all. I think our hope is that we'll send it out to get your thoughts and your recommendations in regards to it. But again, it was just simply an exercise in documenting an existing process.
So one of the things that in Kristen and my conversations, we talked a bit about was the current inconsistencies between the two and what could potentially be done, or should this committee recommend an alignment of definition. And that was my end in mind, at least as we move forward from this, but I'd like to get the committee's comment. As of right now, when and Kristen put together a table of those that have the multi-campus and those that have the small school supplements, and probably 70% of the time they match, but the other 30% there are mismatches, and I think historically there's been differing processes on how to get them incorporated. One of the things also out there was on the multi-campus, it talks in terms of legislative authority to be added. And my initial thought, and certainly the folks that I've talked with, having them receive funding through the small class supplement effectively is legislative authorization in some form or fashion. They've identified it and they're providing funding. And so, we tweaked the wording a little bit to put that in there outside of necessarily, requiring a writer in the appropriation bill as the authority to do so. Again, it's draft. I mean, it's so we'll certainly welcome feedback and any comments on that. But I'd certainly welcome your thoughts this morning.
One of the things that I did want to mention is that when you do review it, I've used the terminology remote teaching site. That terminology was pulled from the coordinating board information. And they actually, I referenced the CBM 001 manual as to obtaining a remote teaching site code. And that is what Mike is referring to in regards to, there's a process already to receive that code. And it's that code that is utilized in the small class supplement calculation.
So Mike, can I clarify that it appears based on this recommendation that this will be an increase if based on what you've talked about, there will be an increase in the space model because there's quite a few small class supplements in the INO formula that are not in the space model.
That's my take for the most part, yes. And again, I think part of it is my curiosity as to how could that be, and in the infrastructure formula, I think that's sort of out of sight, out of mind, because there's so many moving pieces to that infrastructure formula that multi-campus adjustment gets lost, I think, and isn't something that anybody focuses on to think about modifying it. And it is very different an approach than on the INO side.
I don't know how the data is reported, but I think that there's going to have to make sure that there's a data alignment between if you've got a remote site on the INO formula, are we reporting the same kind of, how do you tie those two together for the space model? Because I don't know if that happens or not.
I don't think it has, at least that's from the outside looking in. But I think you're exactly correct. It's, I think that's would be a key feature here. And I guess that the question that I would also beg is, as a program grows and you get over the 200 limit, should you be getting this multi-campus? Because everything else should essentially, that growth should effectively fund those other elements. Now, again,
yeah. I think when that
Another
formula
question.
was originally established, and that there was a lot of discussion way back when that formula was originally established for the remote site in the space model, some of that criteria was established, and I'm repeating my predecessor's terminology, but so that it wasn't it wasn't just a storefront that you were operating from, that this was really a campus. And so that was the intent of the space model, was this was an institutional campus. It was not a remote, in essence, a remote teaching site. So I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I know from our perspective, it is costly to have multiple teaching sites. And although I agree with I would hate to see that go away from the space model, to have that duplicate, to have that extra on the space model when you run out because of what it takes to operate an overall campus.
Gotcha. Well, again, I think that's getting some of the historical references to that, I think, is valuable, and unfortunately all too often lost as we all age. But so, yeah, I'd rather not assume anything, and any information we can put into this is so much the better. Even if they do diverge at some point in time, if we at least know why they do, I'd be ecstatic. So, okay, other questions or comments? Hearing none, the last charge we had was study and make recommendations on the use of mission-specific formula funding at health-related institutions. Tomas, you led that work group.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a team effort. During working group discussions, we were discussing how the mission-specific formulas have spanned back to 08 or 09 to the last couple of sessions. And we discovered the OBB, they put together very good and nice summaries, but nothing has been comprehensive. So the thought was, let's put a document together that attempts to accomplish the background the context, how have these been set up, and giving institutions opportunities to provide feedback. So we started using, the document with the LBB primers for many bienniums, and then we started putting data together provided by the coordinating board. We've also included as part of that history how these got created, how existing non-formula funding were used to convert those into the formulas, and how institution had skin in the game as part of those initial creations. And we also talked about SB 30 funding, how we think that's critical, and the committee believes or recommends for the legislature to consider that and continue that funding in the base bill. So where we are in the process, we've sent out a draft report out to all committees. I thank everybody for providing your feedback. I think we're just missing one institution, and hopefully we'll get that wrapped up pretty soon. The thought is we'll try to put an updated draft with, including everybody's feedback. The coordinating board is going to flesh through the numbers, making sure the numbers tick and tie. We're going to run this by Colin next week as well to do the math. But I think in the big scheme of things, quoting my friend Angelica, I think we're about 90% done with the report. And once we get, the numbers fleshed out by Colin and by the coordinating board, the plan is to get this out to the full committee again, middle of November for one final review. We think it's going to be a good document. I've heard unofficially from various folks that it's a good effort by the committee to document the historical background and context. And I think having every institution provide, their own context within their section is going to be very valuable as well. Open to any thoughts, comments on how we can make this better. But I think we're kind of happy and proud. We initially started out thinking we'll get this done in a couple of pages, and it evolved to a little bit more than that. So, but we're happy where we're landed.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the work group's work on this. Comments or thoughts? Anybody other committee members who had worked with Tomas? Anything else you'd like to add, or? Okay. Well, I appreciate the updates from everybody. It sounds like we're making good progress. I think it sounds like we're all somewhat targeting having a solid draft by mid-month. And what I'd like to do at that point in time is we can circulate that among all the members for wordsmithing purposes and feedback and comment on any potential changes. We have our next meeting is November 30th, so we're a little better than 4 weeks away, but we have Thanksgiving in there, obviously. But the goal there would be maybe to have the first draft of the total report by that time. We've got a subsequent meeting scheduled for December 6th, which again, I think when we were initially looking at this, it was the report draft would be done on the 30th, give people a week to really do their final comments, and potentially be in a position where on December 6th we ratify things. I know there's a few items in the report itself that we've typically pulled from AAMC data for some stats and things that report oftentimes doesn't come out till the latter part of November or first part of December. So there may be a few placeholders at that point in time, but the idea would be again to wrap things up by December 6th and no later than currently January 10th. That's scheduled. Any thoughts on change or needs to change of dates or
Mike, I don't have any thoughts on changing the dates. I think those are solid dates. I do have a question for Melita or Jennifer. I know that when we met last with the co-work group, they were going to provide some writing, some language. I haven't seen any, or maybe if it has, I just hadn't seen it in my inbox. Do y'all know if that's been sent out yet?
I'm not aware. I don't know if Emily or Jennifer might be.
Mike, yes, it was. I think it was last week, but we can forward that to you so you've got it.
Okay, just put it back on the top of my inbox. I would appreciate that, and I'll send it out to our group to review. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I did want to ask if possible, given the November timeframe we're looking at, if folks think they could have their drafts perhaps ready, to me by maybe the 10th, or at least aiming for the 10th, so that we have time to kind of consolidate everything and check for consistency and all that stuff.
okay,
Thank you.
okay. Any other business to attend to or thoughts on where we stand? Hearing none, could I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved. And thank you for the quickness on the meetings again, Mike. You're efficient as always.
I aim to please. It's so do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lang. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, well, we will I appreciate that. We will see everybody, and the plan at this point is to have a virtual meeting again on November 30th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.